In this exercise, we're going to work on our square corner seams. And when you look at these two pattern pieces, there's something we haven't seen before, and it says RSU in red on both of these pattern pieces. What this means is right side up. Some companies will call it face side up, so you'd see FSU. But I'm going to use RSU. That means that this pattern cannot be turned over to cut it out. It signals the cutter that the pattern must remain with the face side up or the right side up with the pattern information being seen. That's so we won't accidentally cut out a wrong piece. If I cut this piece here like this and try to flip it over to sew it to the seam, it won't work. So I must cut the fabric this way because we're going to come back and we're going to align these notches up here to sew down this way, and then we will pivot and we will match the other notch and continue sewing this way. So let's get these cut out. So I've got my fabric, no selvage, so I'm going to do a pull test. Pull here, I get give, I pull here, no give. So this is my straight grain. So I'm also going to try to conserve as much fabric as I can too. So instead of putting this L-shaped piece down up closer to the ripped edge, I'm going to move it down just a little bit so that I can actually fit this piece right in that crook there, right? So that I can actually use this line to cut as a cut edge. So I'm going to actually hold this one here and I'll put weights and I will trace. And then after you finish tracing each piece, remember to go back and mark your notches for clipping. These are very important. I've done this piece. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to place this right on those traced lines here. And I'll weight this down. And then I'm going to continue with the tracing of this piece. And I've traced both of these right side up, meaning that the pattern side with the information must face up while you're tracing it. Now I'm marking my notches for this piece. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and cut these out, and I'm just going to cut this whole piece off of this edge. And then what I'll do is I'll cut out this square first. So now that I have the two pieces cut out, I need to go back and I need to clip all of my notches. Now, since we're actually sewing one piece to another like we would be sewing it to a garment, we need to understand the length of my clips. So we really don't want to be clipping more than half of the seam allowance. And these notches up here are the seam allowance notches. It's 1/2 inch. So when we make a clip here, here, and here, and here, that has a seam allowance in it. So we don't want to clip those notches more than half of that seam allowance. So when I come in here to clip these ones, I'm just going to make tiny little clips. And I'm going to actually follow the same method with the seam allowance notches as well. Remember, if this is a seam allowance notch and this is going to be sewn into something else, we don't want to be clipping a very long clip for our notches. Okay, so now that I have all my notches clipped, I'm going to mark my face side. And I want to have a look at something, want to show you something. So this piece goes on to this piece. So here I've got my seam allowance knot, and I'm going to match this notch and this notch. So I can see where that is. Oh, and I forgot to clip that. So I'm going to clip that right now. So I'm going to lay this, I'm going to match that notch on top of that. So it goes all the way flat, and my notches here match. Now, when we look at it, we've got our face sides together. That's what we want. What we're going to do is we're going to sew from here, 1/2 inch seam allowance straight down. And then when we sew, we're going to see at the edge of the fabric here. Remember, I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. So we want to continue sewing, and I'll put a ruler here, along this edge to that point 1/2 inch past this raw edge, because that is actually going to be the new seam allowance that we're going to sew here. We're going to leave the needle in the machine here. We're going to come underneath and clip from here up to the needle, and then we will pull this fabric back around, and it will twist around, and it will actually match this notch here. And then from this point, again, we will sew to match up the notch here. And then we will actually get a square that looks similar, something like that, except you won't see this seam. So to get this set up, again, we're going to put face sides together. We're going to put this notch and this notch together. And I'm going to go ahead and put some pins. I'll turn this around so that I can easily pin this, but I'll turn it back around so that you can see. So now that I've got this edge pinned, sew down here, and I've already marked my 1/2 inch in. Again, my 1/2 inch in is my stitching line, and then my 1/2 inch down from here, square, I've kind of pencil marked the point that I need to stop. I need to leave the needle in the machine, clip, and pivot. And now we're ready to go to the machine and sew. Okay, I'm ready to do the corner square seam, and previously I have everything pinned up, face sides together. If you can see that face, I've got face sides together. I've matched my seam allowance notch up here, and I've matched my sewing notch here, and I also have my pivot point marked. All right, so what's going to happen is that this is going to be a 1/2 inch seam based on our notch, and then we're going to sew straight down to this point, and I'm going to put the needle in. I'm going to put it all the way down, and then I'm going to lift the presser foot, and I'm going to come under there. It's going to be tough to see, but I'm going to actually clip this corner diagonally to the needle, and then I'll be able to pivot these two pieces around. So let's get this going. So presser foot up, fabric in just past the needle, needle down. I'm going to remove this pin, and I'm going to start with the back stitch. Move this pin. Now we're coming up to where we may not be able to see our 1/2 inch. So we'll just have to eye it all the way down to this point. And I'm going to sew down. Now, if you want to stop because you're not sure you can stop right at that pivot point, it's certainly okay to just hand turn the needle until you get to that point. And I'm right on it, so I'm going to put that needle straight down. And then I'm actually going to lift my presser foot, right? So maybe you can, I don't know if you can see this from the back side, right? So if you can see the needle up there, I'm going to grab my snips or a very sharp pair of scissors, and I'm going to come over to here. I'm just going to clip but don't clip the top fabric up to that needle, just up to that needle. And what that does is opens up, it eases this up, so I can turn this, the bottom part, and then I'm going to hold on to this area here, and I'm going to pull the top part, and I'm going to pivot that around. Takes a little getting used to. Make sure the bottom fabric is nice and flat going this other way. And pull this fabric around so it's nice and flat. I'm just going to look under here really quickly under here, get that to pull flatter, right? Lining it up to our 1/2 inch, and our notches will match here. And then I'm going to continue to sew my 1/2 inch seam all the way back down to my 1/2 inch notch, and I'm going to back stitch at the end. And we'll take this out and clip that. And now it does look, what you'll get if you can't clip all the way to the top is that you'll get this little buckling. And let's look at the other side of this really quickly. We may be able to fix that a little bit by just clipping a little back further into that. Okay, let's see what I'm going to fold this back, and we'll see what we've got. Yes, we can. I think we can clean that up a little bit. If we see here, what the issue is right here. I have quite a bit of fabric that is far away from that stitch line, and we just need to clip a little bit more into that, and it will flatten. And we'll go ahead and do that at the pressing mat. Okay, so let's finish up this square corner seam. So we did pretty good stitching here, but you'll notice that the corner here doesn't look so pretty. And there was a reason for that, if you remember being in the machine, if you can see this. So if I get really close to the camera, there's some fabric here between the stitch line of the corner. So I couldn't clip all the way to it. And most of the time, you're not going to be able to clip all the way to that corner pivot line. So you'll have to come back in with your snips and just get in here. Remember, you're only cutting the larger piece. So I just want to get in here and I want to clip that just a little bit closer to that stitch line. Give it one more clip there. Then let's have a look at what this looks like. That looks a little bit better. A little bit more there. We could clip just a little bit closer to that corner. Okay, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually press this line. And press this line. And I'm folding the seam allowance away from the inset square to the outside, and I'm just going to top stitch this. I'm just going to press this on the top of the you could top stitch this along here if you would like. I'm not going to, because I want to make sure that I can still see. Now it still looks a little puckery here, and I'll tell you why that is. If we look up here real close, my stitch crosses over that corner line. So next time when we do this, and I may do a speed version of this so you can see me get a real good corner in here, but this is a good teaching moment for you to understand. This stitch right here is going across where I pivoted. So in order to get a real corner point, like I don't really have a good corner point here, it's more of a rounded, I actually need to have that stitch not be across. So I'll probably do a speed version of this so you can just watch me get that corner point in there, and then I'll come back and press it again so you can see that actual corner point. But it's not too bad. So you could also go back and overlock these edges, but I'm not going to do that because I want to see anything that isn't right, that isn't correct. So I'm going to actually save this into my notebook, and I'm going to do another one. And once I get that one finished, I'll come right back here to the pressing pad and show you.